All right, so, you know, plant-based diets.
Yeah.
It seems like everybody's got something to say these days about going vegan or vegetarian, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to sort through, I think.
Yeah.
And you've given us a stack of really interesting sources to kind of dig into.
Absolutely.
So
Let's see what we can learn.
let's unpack this together,
Yeah.
see what we can learn.
It's a hot topic for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's for good reason.
Yeah.
You know, our food choices, they touch on so many things.
Right.
It's our health, it's the environment,
Yeah.
it's our personal values.
Absolutely. So to make sure we're all on the same page, can we start by kind of breaking down these different plant-based diets? Like,
Okay.
what exactly is the difference between vegan, vegetarian, and all the variations in between?
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
I think what's fascinating is that it's not just black and white,
Right.
you know, meat or no meat.
Yeah.
The sources you provided really highlight this spectrum of choices.
Yeah, like one source, uh, 6 types of vegetarian diets explained,
Right?
actually outlines 6 different types.
Wow.
It's a lot more nuanced than I realized.
Exactly. And on one end of the spectrum, you have veganism,
Yeah.
which is the strictest form, no animal products whatsoever.
Okay.
So that means no meat, no poultry, no fishes,
Well,
dairy, eggs, honey, even some forms of vitamin D can be a point of debate.
wow, that's serious commitment.
It is.
Then there's lacto-ovo vegetarian,
Right.
which is probably what most people think of when they hear vegetarian.
Yeah, exactly.
They include dairy and eggs.
Yep. And of course, there are variations within that.
Right.
So you have lacto-vegetarian
Right.
and ovo-vegetarian.
So those are the folks who choose just dairy or just eggs,
Correct.
not both.
Not both.
And we can't forget pescatarians,
Yes.
who include fish and seafood, but not other meat.
Right.
So many options.
Children, it's a lot.
And then there's flexitarianism,
Yeah.
which feels like the more modern approach
I was going to say that too. It seems very,
of the moment.
it's mainly plant-based, but allows for occasional meat or other animal products.
Exactly. And it's really just sort of a recognition that for some, it's not about the strict rules, but just a shift toward a more plant-centric way of eating.
Which makes me think, is it even fair to lump all these diets together?
Yeah.
I mean, a vegan and a flexitarian have very different plates.
That's a good question. From a purely dietary perspective,
Right.
you're right, there are huge differences.
Yeah.
But I think what unites them is this conscious decision to prioritize plant-based foods.
Yeah.
It's a shared philosophy, even if the specifics vary.
Okay, so philosophy aside,
Sure.
let's talk practicalities.
Okay.
A lot of people worry about missing out on essential nutrients if they ditch meat.
Right.
What do the sources say about the health benefits and potential downsides?
Well, there's actually quite a bit of research on that and many studies,
Okay.
including one called PDF, Vegetarian and Vegan Diets,
Yeah.
Benefits and Drawbacks.
Link well-planned vegetarian and vegan diets to a lower risk of chronic diseases.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, even some types of cancer.
That's a pretty impressive list. So what's the magic ingredient?
Right.
Is it simply the absence of meat, or is there something more to it?
It's more about what you are eating than what you're not eating.
Okay.
Plant-based diets tend to be high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, all that good stuff that's packed with fiber, vitamins, antioxidants, all those nutrients that we need.
So it's not just about cutting out meat, it's about replacing it with nutritious alternatives?
Right.
Makes sense. But realistically, are there nutrients that are harder to get on a plant-based diet?
There are a few that require more attention.
Okay.
Source 6 types of vegetarian diets explain specifically mentions vitamin B12, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, iron, and calcium.
Those are some big ones.
Yeah.
So is everybody destined for a lifetime of supplements if they go vegan?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The sources suggest some clever workarounds. Fortified foods like plant-based milks or cereals can help with B12.
Right.
Combining incomplete protein sources like rice and beans makes a complete protein.
That's a good reminder. It's not all about restriction.
Exactly.
You can get creative with how you combine plant-based foods.
Absolutely. And you can always consult with a registered dietitian
Oh, good point.
to make sure you're meeting all your needs.
Yeah,
They can tailor a plan based on your individual requirements.
good point. It's not one size fits all. But speaking of specific nutrients, you know how people worry about getting enough iron from plants?
Yes.
I know it's not as easily absorbed as from meat.
You're right. That's a common concern.
Yeah.
But here's a helpful tip from the sources. Vitamin C boosts iron absorption from plant sources.
Okay.
So something as simple as squeezing lemon on your spinach salad
Right.
can make a real difference.
That's a good reminder that simple tweaks can go a long way. I've even heard of using cast iron cookware
Oh, yeah.
to boost iron content, though I'm not sure how much of a difference that really makes.
That's an interesting one. I haven't seen any conclusive research on that, but
Okay.
it certainly can't hurt.
Right.
It's all about exploring different options and finding what works for you.
Well said. It seems like knowledge is power when it comes to plant-based eating.
It
You
is.
really have to do your research and plan accordingly.
Right.
But speaking of things to be aware of, didn't one of the sources mention something about antibiotics in meat?
You're thinking of merits and demerits of non-vegetarian food.
Yes.
It points out that because farm animals are often given antibiotics, traces can end up in meat we consume.
Which makes me wonder, is meat even the pure source of nutrients we often assume it to be?
That's a great point. It highlights the interconnectedness of our food system.
Yeah.
What happens to the animals we eat ultimately affects us as well.
It really does make you think about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So beyond the purely nutritional aspects, a lot of people are drawn to vegetarianism or veganism for ethical and environmental reasons. What are some of the key points raised in the sources you reviewed?
We'll delve into that next. What stood out to you from the materials you shared?
Well, one thing that struck me was how much emphasis the sources put on factory farming practices.
Yeah.
You know, 6 types of vegetarian diets explained was pretty eye-opening about the conditions in those CFOs.
Right.
It's hard to ignore the ethical implications of how we treat animals raised for food.
Yeah, that's definitely a recurring theme in the materials you selected.
Yeah.
The treatment of animals in industrial farming systems is a major concern for many people who choose to reduce or eliminate meat from their diets.
And it's not just about animal welfare, there's the environmental impact, too.
Yeah, right.
The same source also highlighted how meat production contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and water usage.
Yeah.
It's pretty staggering when you think about the resources it takes to produce meat compared to plant-based foods.
Yes. The environmental footprint of animal agriculture is significant. 6 types of vegetarian diets explained even compares the environmental impact of different diets,
Okay.
showing how even small shifts toward more plant-based meals can make a difference.
Which makes me wonder, is it even possible to produce enough food for everyone sustainably if we all continue eating meat at the current rate?
That's a complex question with no easy answers.
Right.
The sources you've chosen seem to suggest that a more plant-forward approach is likely necessary for a sustainable food system,
Okay.
but there's debate about how to get there.
It feels like we're at a crossroads, so much to consider, both personally and globally.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, even with all these compelling reasons, making a big dietary change can be daunting.
It certainly can.
Yeah.
Switching to a completely different way of eating can feel overwhelming, especially if you're used to a meat-centric diet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But 6 types of vegetarian diets explained had some really good advice about not needing to go all in right away.
Right.
They suggest starting with meatless Mondays or simply swapping out a few meals a week with plant-based options. It's more about building new habits gradually.
That's a great point. Drastic changes can be hard to maintain.
Right.
A gradual approach allows you to experiment, explore new flavors, and find what works for you without feeling deprived.
And balanced diet for vegetarians
Yeah.
and benefits of non-vegetarian foods reminds us that balance is key regardless of your dietary choices.
Absolutely.
Focus on whole foods, watch portion sizes, stay hydrated.
Right.
Those are good principles for everyone, whether you're vegan, a flexitarian, or somewhere in between.
Absolutely. It's about finding a sustainable way of eating that nourishes both your body and your values.
Well said.
Oh.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The different types of plant-based diets, potential benefits, challenges, ethical concerns, environmental impacts.
We have.
It's been quite the whirlwind.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I have one more thought.
Okay.
We've touched on health ethics and the environment, but I keep thinking about that cultural piece you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
How does culture fit into all of this?
That's a great question. The sources don't go into it deeply, but it's an essential aspect.
Yeah.
Food is so intertwined with our cultural identities, traditions, and social norms.
Right, like think about the blue zones mentioned in Plant-Based Vegetarian and Vegan Diets Heart Foundation NZ.
Yeah.
Those are regions around the world known for longevity and health, and their diets vary widely.
Right.
Some are heavily plant-based, while others include meat and dairy.
Exactly.
It shows that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and culture plays a huge role.
Exactly what's considered healthy or normal in one culture might be very different in another.
Right.
Understanding these cultural nuances is crucial when we talk about dietary choices.
And it makes me wonder, how are these long-standing cultural food traditions evolving as plant-based diets become more mainstream?
Right.
Feels like a fascinating area to explore further.
It definitely is. It's a reminder that food is more than just fuel.
Right.
It's a cultural touchstone, a social connector, and a source of personal identity.
So what you're saying is this deep dive isn't really over. It's just the
Yes.
beginning of a much larger conversation.
Precisely. And like any good conversation, it should involve multiple voices and perspectives.
We've certainly had a lot to digest today.
We have.
Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listener with based on everything we've explored?
I think the most important takeaway is that there's no single right way to eat.
Okay.
It's about finding what works for you, your values, and your lifestyle, whether you're considering going fully vegan, experimenting with meatless meals, or simply incorporating more plant-based foods into your diet knowledge is key.
So true. Do your research, listen to your body, and don't be afraid to experiment.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Beautifully put. And speaking of journeys, this deep dive has definitely taken us to some unexpected places.
Yeah.
Thanks for being such a thoughtful guide.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy exploring these complex topics with you.
And to our listener, thank you for sending us this stack of sources.
Yes.
It sparked a truly fascinating conversation. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did.
If you'd like to delve deeper into the nutritional side of things, vegetarian and vegan diet, meal plan, benefits, differences, provides a good overview of essential nutrients and how to meet your needs on a plant-based diet.
And for those intrigued by the cultural aspects, we encourage you to explore anthropological studies on food and culture. We'll include some links in the show notes.
In the meantime, keep those minds curious and those palates adventurous.
Until next time, happy exploring. And for those intrigued by the cultural aspects, we encourage you to explore anthropological studies on food and culture. We'll include some links in the show notes.
In the meantime, keep those minds curious and those palates adventurous.
Until next time, happy exploring.